Where's the other part of the gavel?
What, the base?
Oh, yeah, the base. I just have the one part.
I think it's still in the cabinet.
Yeah, I don't want to get in trouble with the police chief for doing that. You know, I hate that one.
That's
Yes,
the one that goes with it,
this
though.
is not the gavel.
Oh, the helmet.
Sorry, we have the wrong gavel, and I don't like this one, so let's just be honest about it. I'm not going to try to mince words. All right, so today is Wednesday, February 1st, and I'm calling to order the first meeting in February for the City Commission of City of Oregon City. Would you do the roll call, please?
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Here.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Here.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Here.
and Mayor Denise McGriff.
Present. Would you all rise and please join me in the flag salute? The other things in the cover is today. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, tonight we have one proclamation, and I want to first of all thank the Oregon City Library for sponsoring the first Black History Month event for our city. Zachary Stocks, the Executive Director of the Oregon Black Pioneers, gave a fantastic presentation, and I hope that folks out in the community where I had an opportunity to see it, I was only able to attend the first half an hour because I had other obligations here. So tonight we have a proclamation in support of Black History Month. And some of you may or may not know, but I just have a couple of opening remarks. My commission will indulge me. So the national news, as we know it, has been a little bit grim over the last few weeks. And unfortunately, I find myself making this statement again as I made a couple of years back, that right now the news is focusing on the pain, the anguish, and trauma experienced by people of color in this country. I worry that we are becoming numb to the trauma of the deaths that have occurred over the last 4 years. We have moved forward in some aspects, but alas, we had some missteps in other areas. I ask all of you, what can be done to make lasting changes in our nation? I'm not sure we all have the answers, but I think as individuals we have to do the best we can to try to move us forward. I know that America can be a better place, and I hope that we can be a better place. So whereas each February, National Black History Month serves both as a celebration and a powerful reminder that Black history is American history. Black culture and American culture and Black stories are essential to the ongoing story of America. And whereas beginning in 1976, every president of the United States has declared the month of February as Black History Month. And whereas Black and African Americans have made innumerable contributions that have enriched America and indeed the lives of every American, Black and African Americans have made and continue to make America a better place and Americans better people. And whereas throughout the arc of history to the present day, Black and African Americans have experienced and endured the inhumanity of injustices and inequalities, and whereas in the face of wounds and obstacles older than our nation itself, Black and African Americans can be seen in every part of our society today, strengthening and uplifting all of America. And whereas on June 9th, 2020, the City Commission of the City of Oregon City, we individually signed Resolution 20-19, stating and outlining the city's stance against racism, discrimination, social injustices in our country and community. And whereas as we celebrate National Black History Month, let us all recommit to ourselves to reach for that which every American is due. Let us move forward the work to build an America that is benevolent, diverse, and united. Now therefore be it resolved that the City Commission of the City of Oregon City calls upon all educators, librarians, and all people of the City of Oregon City to observe this month with appropriate programs, ceremonies, and activities, and we do hereby proclaim February 2023 as Black History Month and call upon the residents of Oregon City to join their fellow citizens across the United States in recognizing and participating in this special observance. In witness whereof, I will set my hand this first day of February 2023. All right, let's move on to our regular agenda. We have one person who would like to speak before the commission for items, and this is for items that are not currently on the agenda. Is that item currently on the agenda, Ms. Dahlstrid?
Oh, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
If it's currently an item on the agenda, okay.
Yes.
All right, okay, all right. Is there anybody else? I don't have any slips. Do we have anybody online? Okay. All right. Pardon? Nobody? Okay. Just want to make sure we don't leave anybody out. All right, so we have the consent agenda. Are there any commission concerns regarding anything on, oh, excuse me, sorry, Nancy. Sorry, I jumped ahead to number 6. So we have a presentation from the Natural Resources Committee. Is there activities for the calendar 2022? And I'd like the chair and vice chair to come forward. And somebody will help you adjust your mics over there if they need that. And thank you for coming.
Is this on?
Is the light on?
Yeah.
Okay. You should be good to go, so just
Okay.
introduce yourselves again.
I'm Nancy Broshot. I'm the chair of the Natural Resources Committee, and
Hi, I'm Samantha Wolf. I'm the vice chair.
and I know that Pete provided you with a packet about just what we are and what we do, and gave you details of what we've done over the previous year, but I want to just kind of summarize the main things that we worked on. And if there's questions, please ask them at the end. You may have some questions about some of the things. One of the big things we worked on was street trees. We were tasked with modifying the street tree list last year or in 2001 after the big ice storm, and I can't remember, was it last year or the year before, but the commission asked us to look at the street tree list and modify it. And so we took that to heart, and we modified the trees based on the parking strip widths to make sure that we were getting trees that were fit in the space that we had for them. We looked at the climate change, so what trees would survive heat waves and droughts and ice storms and wind storms better. And then we also looked in terms of pests, and the emerald ash borer hadn't even reared its head locally when we went through the list, but there are a number of other pests, so we modified it to that. We also talked with city staff. They have planter strip standard drawing number 530, which is the curb, the contain the trees to keep them off the sidewalk and out of the curb, and we helped modify the design of that. And then on June 7th last year, we actually presented to the commission our list of street trees, and at that time we recommended a modified street tree amendment for the planting strips, and so that's before you tonight. We also recommended that the city consider hiring a city forester, an urban forester. The second thing we did was we spent a lot of time working on the OC 2040 comprehensive plan. One of our members who has since stepped down, Chris Weaver, was actually took part in interviewing citizens for that plan, and so we've talked about that quite a bit. The third thing we did was heritage trees, and we're always going to keep talking more and more about heritage trees and hopefully adding more and more. We had recommendations for heritage trees. We sent 4 to the City Commission that were accepted, and those trees are listed on your packet. And then we had one tree that got badly damaged in the ice storm, and then it got, the ultimate irony was it came down, a big chunk of it came down in the windstorm that we had earlier, and so that had to be removed physically as a tree, and we recommended removing that as a heritage tree, obviously. So the fourth thing, we actually met with the city attorney, Carrie Richter, about the advisory role of the NRC, and that was a very valuable thing because we had a lot of new members who weren't quite sure exactly where we were supposed to be and what we were supposed to be doing, and it helped me. It reminded me of some things that we needed to do too. So that was valuable. The fifth thing is we looked at a lot of the pollination issues, pollinator issues, and protections. So we had a presentation on the monarch butterfly pledge, and the city had already the mayor had already made that pledge, but we totally supported that. And then the following month, we had a presentation from the Xerces Society on Bee City. And we recommend that the city consider joining Bee City because it would really help augment the monarch butterfly. Protecting all of the pollinators will help protect the monarch butterfly. And we also had discussions about how the NRC can help the city put those plans into implementation if they want any advice from us. The sixth thing we did was the emerald ash borer. When that was first discovered in Forest Grove, the last I had heard, the closest it was in Colorado. And I figured, well, we got 10 years maybe before it gets to Oregon, and then all of a sudden somebody finds it in Forest Grove. So when it gets here, because it's not a matter of if, we know it's going to get here, that's going to be devastating. And so we had a number of discussions with city staff in terms of how the city is prepared for dealing with that when it gets here and what we're going to do. And we also helped develop that little bulletin that went out in the city water bills a few months back. I got really excited when I saw that. I mean, we didn't do the plan on the thing, but we made recommendations as to what should go on that pamphlet. The seventh big thing that we're still working on are the Arbor Day celebration and the Hiroshima Peace Tree dedication events. So we spent a lot of time trying to come up with things for Arbor Day to make it more exciting than it has been. We are Tree City, after all. So that upcoming Arbor Day celebration is going to be April 1st, 8:30 to 12:30 at the EOT. And then we also helped plan the Hiroshima Peace Tree dedication event. We planted that during the COVID outbreak, but it's finally going to be dedicated like it needs to be dedicated. And we talked to the city about how best to protect that tree and promote it so that most people don't even know it's there. That event is going to be April 29th, 10 to noon at the EOT. And then finally, urban forester. We had several discussions with city staff about the need for that. And so we really would like to see the city put that in the budget that's coming up because we feel that is a really, really huge piece that's missing from our city. And then the last thing I want to say before you guys can ask any questions is we have 3 vacancies on our board right now, and we really, really are looking for people who are interested in protecting the natural resources of Oregon City. So if anybody's interested, please, please apply for that position. So does anybody have any questions?
Questions? I appreciated the fact that the pamphlet in the utility bill, because it's not a water bill, utility bill about the emerald ash borer. So if you happen to see the city's e-blast, there is a thing in there about the tree of heaven, and I would like to see you do something, help put something together about that, because that is on my #1 enemy list for Oregon City.
Yeah.
I hate that shrub, invasive species. It is awful. We had a bunch of it growing along Washington Street down by 11th, and our staff has nobly tried to remove it. It got a foothold on 7th. All of that got pulled up, but I mean, it's everywhere, and I don't know why people, for one thing, I'm sure they don't want to pull it up because if you touch it, it smells, and then your hands smell terrible, but we need to...
It also spreads, once you
yes,
cut the tree down, it root suckers everywhere.
It has rhizomes, so you can't just cut it off.
Yeah.
There's a vacant piece of property near the, trying to think of what the street is. It dead ends, it's next to the State Farm office, it's over by the fence, and they keep cutting it down, and it comes back bigger and bigger and bigger because it says, oh, I'm threatened. Right. So that would be something I would like to see us get out to people, and it'd be great if we could put a bounty out on it because I think then people would get rid of it. But
there's so many of them.
Unless, I know, but we have to start somewhere. We have to start somewhere.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to go for the ivy and the
well, we still have the Ivy groups, and one of my Ivy friends is sitting out there in the audience, so we have all done, but there's still more to do.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing. I like your idea of the forester, and that is moving forward. There were a couple of things that I saw that are coming up later on the agenda where we're talking about hiring, or it says city-approved registered arborist, and then we use the term certified arborist. So I think If we don't have definitions of that, we need to clarify what that is. My big concern about that is that when we have requests for tree removal, they have an arborist, and it's also the same person that is cutting down the tree, which I think there's a major conflict right there with that.
Right. And I think if we had an urban forester, you could get an urban forester who is a certified arborist,
Right.
which would then, that person would be the person making the final decision as to whether that tree should come down or not.
Yeah, it kind of seems like it's been self-serving in the past.
Yeah.
But any other comments about their excellent report? Mr. Morrow?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate all the work that's been done this last year. I just want to say that I am really supportive of our city participating in the Bee City USA program. You probably don't know, but as a kid, I wanted to be an entomologist, and if John Lewis would tell you about an odd email I sent him a couple months ago asking him about our city streetlights, and because I had read a report about how LEDs are potentially harming our insects and our ecosystem, and I don't think he was expecting that, but I think this is something that we really need to be prioritizing and publicizing. I'm really excited that there's going to be a new license plate dedicated to our bees, and not just the honeybees, the ones who colonize, but the ones who live by themselves and are really a lot more prevalent and important to our ecosystems and the pollination. So thank you so much, and know that you have a supportive commission up here.
Thank you.
Do we have
And
support
just as a
for us to be
comment,
involved in the bee program, Xerces Society?
Be involved in it?
Yes.
Yes, in addition to the license plate or what?
No, in addition, so one of their statements in the report talks about us, Bee City USA program. Okay?
Yep.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
We've got that. We're already out, and I saw what Mr. Reed has proposed for the activities for the Mayor's Monarch Pledge, and that was really spurred on a lot by the late Karen Morey, and she got me to agree to sign it. So I said, yes, let's do it.
Yeah, well, if you need any input from our committee to help with
Mr.
those
Reed will
things.
be your conduit for that.
All right, excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for all your work, and we will see what we can do. Maybe Mr. Lyman can spin a nice request on our website to say, we are looking for members. Are you interested in XYZ in this particular area? And he's raised his thumbs up. Okay, so he's already on it.
Excellent. Thank you very
Okay,
much.
thank you. All right, so let's move to item number 6, which is the adoption of the agenda. Do we have anything on the consent agenda that we would like to discuss, or do I have a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent agenda as is.
I'd like to pull 7G.
Oh,
7G,
spoke too soon.
okay.
I'll approve the
Subject
consent
to-
agenda minus that item.
Okay, is there a second, please?
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda minus 7G.
Commissioner
All those-
Adam Morrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell.
Aye.
Mayor Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, let's, although we said we'd put this on, we'd move this down to item number 9, let's hear about the vehicle, the replacement vehicle.
I could probably just, I could
right
ask
ahead.
Kendall questions. It would
Go
be
right ahead.
Right to the point. So Kendall, I watch pennies to save dollars, and I'm curious, this report says that you have this money available, you portray it as a cost savings because we weren't able to procure a mower replacement. Do we still need that mower?
Yes, we do.
So it's not a cost saving, it's unexpended funds because we couldn't get the equipment we needed.
Well, the plan is not to move forward with the purchase of the mower and then to move forward with the mower at a later date and possibly in the next biennium.
But the mower is still a need.
It's still
We'll
a
have to
need,
do it.
yes.
So it's unexpended funds because we couldn't get the equipment we needed. Now, it's not an authorized budget expenditure, but we got this money, and we added a person. What does this person do that they need a vehicle?
The person that we added was a park maintenance specialist 3.
Okay, so he's a maintenance guy.
Yes.
And we're using every other vehicle in the fleet. We're out of vehicles.
I would have to ask a question to John about where we stand with vehicles in regards to the age and if it was time to kind of move on from this vehicle due to repairs. We've had a lot of vehicles go down and trying to manage getting the repairs, but trying to be able to still be functional. And so after a certain point where we can no longer move forward with repairs, then we talk about the possibility of replacing the vehicle.
Right. And I actually like seeing those kind of things, that at this point it's timely to replace because our trade-in value is greater or our maintenance costs are so high. But that's not what this report says. So I'm not going to beat this to death. I'd just like to see certain things. It's not a cost savings, it's unexpended funds. We still have a need. If somebody called you with an available mower today out of the blue, you would want that, wouldn't you?
Yes, we would.
Yeah. Okay. I'm not going to micromanage your department. I just wanted to understand this report. That's it. Thanks.
Do we have a motion for approval?
I'll move to approve purchase of the vehicle.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Mayor Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, we have no public hearings tonight, which is lovely. So let's move on to item 9. So we have general business. So item 9A is Resolution 2302, calling for election May 16th, 2023, to forward question of authorizing dedication of portion of Park Place Park as, well, yeah, as a street to the electors of the City of Oregon City. Is this Mr. Conkle, or is this Mr. Reed, or is this Mr. Kabizman?
I'll go ahead and, this was brought before your last meeting. We brought forward the ballot measure and the explanatory statement. So as you recall, Park Place Park, has a unimproved Hiram Avenue that bisects the park north and south. It's unimproved at this point. It does have utilities located in that right-of-way. The Park Place Park Master Plan was adopted in 1996, and it identified to alleviate the potential of a street or some type of access way being constructed through the middle of the park was that 40-foot section on the north end of the park would be dedicated to provide right-of-way access from Front Avenue to Hiram Avenue, alleviating the need to access through the middle of the park to reach the undeveloped parcel to the north of Park Place Park. Right now, there's one parcel that's frontage is located on Hiram Avenue, so we are obligated to provide access to that property from a public right-of-way, which is Hiram Avenue. Since the Park Place Park was adopted in 1996, the dedication had not occurred. The City Commission subsequently identified and made Park Place Park a charter park. So our charter requires that if we're going to dedicate property for something other than a park use, it needs to go to a vote of the people. So what you have before you tonight is a request to place on the May 16th ballot before the voters the authority to dedicate a portion of Park Place Park, 40 feet, as public right-of-way for a street connection from Front Avenue to Hiram Avenue.
Is there any comments by the commission?
I have one question. So we're going to provide an alternate right-of-way to access this property.
Correct.
What happens to the existing one? Does it get undedicated or placed into the park, or should that be a part of this very same measure that goes to the people, that we do both things at once?
We haven't had a discussion yet about what to do with the right-of-way that's there. So if this is approved, we'll have a new connection. So it alleviates the need for that section of Hiram to be used for vehicular access. We do have utilities that are in that right-of-way right now. So I think that could be a discussion of, do we leave it as a right-of-way, just realizing that we have utilities in there, but it's never going to be developed as a street. Do we put an easement over it for the benefit of those utilities and vacate that section of right-of-way? I don't believe that we need the voter approval to vacate the right-of-way and give it back to the two adjoining tax lots that are there.
Which is the park.
Correct.
Yeah.
See, that sounds like a good way to do it.
I agree.
Vacate it, give it back to the park as part of the same action that we're going to do this street, or a separate action that
So,
gets it done.
yeah, the voters don't have the authority to vacate. That's
But we
been
do, right?
the commission. So presumably, if that's where you want to go, then you would need this before you could go to the vacation.
Yeah,
But we would want to make sure that we somehow clarified that prior to vacation, that the utilities can still be accessed and serviced and maintenance or, improved if we ever got to replace that line that's in there.
Yeah, I think that clarifies it. The other thing I would like to see is I would like to see us put something there that blocks the access so that people cannot continue to drive on that. And that if we vacate it, that we put bollards or some kind of barrier there that, this is a park, no access except from where we're moving it at that point, because that's where some of this started. Again, you weren't here yet. I had already left. We had gotten this teed up to go to the commission. I don't remember what happened with it afterwards, but this was the intent all along, that this would happen, because we basically, as I recall, this was listed as park property when we annexed. And when we discovered all of this other craziness with it, with the road there and all of that, that's why the proposal came forward with that. But it just never got executed. So I think we have an opportunity to correct this. And we had one of our local home builders drive his trucks back, and his company was driving their trucks back and forth on there, causing, more degradation to the property and compacting that down where those trees are. So if we can do the vacation after this is hopefully approved, and then block the access with some sort of signage that says this is only no vehicular, but make it available. If we have to go in and South Fork has to do some maintenance, they can still get there, but we're not going to be using this as a thoroughfare, because right now if you go over there, you can tell kind of where there's a path that obviously cars have driven on. So
That was the goal.
yeah.
Two thoughts. Maybe there's a way we could make it more clear in here that if this is approved, then steps that would be taken so that no vehicular access would be allowed along that strip. I think it says removes the need for vehicular access, but I think this might be more palatable to voters if it's clear that cars will not, vehicles will not use this once that dedication. And then the other question I
Well,
have.
it would be except for routine and ordinary maintenance of the utilities. But
Yeah,
we don't-
okay.
but
Well,
that-
yeah, whatever the wording needs to be, but make it clear that we're going
no
to, we're going to
public.
block normal vehicle day-to-day access.
Right.
And I guess I just have a question whether or not we need 40 feet. I mean, this is serving one, potentially two pieces of property. Narrower lanes, narrower streets lead to lower speeds, which we would want right next to a park. So I don't, maybe this is a question for Mr. Lewis, and he, I don't want to dedicate something that's not going to accommodate our future needs, but I also question whether we would ever need to build a
40-foot right-of-way.
full 40-foot street to serve one or two pieces of property.
I asked the city manager that very question. Could we make it narrower?
And the answer was?
And the answer is we do not have designs for a street. So I guess to your first point, we have a timing issue. So if you're familiar with the park, you enter the parking lot off of Front Avenue, and then there's a certain amount of space that inclines, goes up a hill, that's grass right now, that connects to Hiram. So we do have to allow access until that connection is made. So right now, if this is approved, we would have the right-of-way, but nothing would be constructed at this point. So we'd have to design something, and that the design work has not happened. The 40-foot, this was discussed and contemplated quite a bit in the, looking back at the minutes in the approved master plan from 96. So that's where the 40-foot came from. It wasn't based on a design or a street standard, because you're right. I mean, realistically, we're providing access for one lot through this, so I don't think it needs to be your typical 32-foot local street. But we do have some elevation we're going to need to address, as well as at that point it's a 90 turn. So I guess I can see a constrained street. We build constrained streets based on what's needed. I mean, we've put driveways in rights of ways. So I imagine it'll be something similar to that, but we do not have a design yet. And like I said, the 40-foot was based off of what was recommended in the approved master plan.
Okay,
I
thank
think
you.
you mentioned that we could possibly look at with the right-of-way. When we talked, you and I chatted, we were talking about possibly putting some parking in part of that right-of-way so that it could be not angled, but
Parallel.
parallel parking adjacent to the park, so that there would be some place for people to be. So that would be helpful if the right-of-way was the full 40 feet, because then we'd have a constrained right-of-way, but we'd have parking on one side where people could park there to access the park.
I agree. I think that there's design work and that has to occur to accommodate that. Right now, it's the 40-foot, a portion of that is in the existing parking lot. So I would imagine there's going to be some redesign related to how we're going to fit, the parking in there, probably some type of pedestrian access, and then safe travel lanes in that section.
Could we add the statement to the resolution and to the any place what Commissioner Mitchell was suggesting, that it would, so for instance, the resolution, it says, whereas it would remove the need to construct, public vehicular access through the park. I don't know if that's the word, but and then how would we be able to get in with the word limit that we have, that there would not be any further access through the park? So maybe it says would remove, not the need, but remove vehicular access way through the park, because we don't really need it.
Are you referencing the summary?
I'm looking at Exhibit A, where it says would allow access to the undeveloped private property and would remove the need to construct a vehicular access way. So it could say remove.
How about this new connection would allow removal of the vehicular access? Because it's, it's not going to do it, but it would allow the commission to do it in the future.
Does that get to what you, okay, that sounds good.
This new connection. Will
We
remove
have
the
one
need for
comment. You
allow
want to say
removal
something?
of 4 words, 3 words. Oh, no.
So could you read that again, Bill?
So this would be, I believe, the second sentence of the second paragraph of the summary.
Okay.
And it currently reads, this new connection will remove the need for vehicular access to be constructed. Instead, it would say, this new connection would allow removal of vehicular access through the middle of Park Place Park, and so take out to be constructed as well.
Okay. Does that sound good, everybody?
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Mitchell. I'd like to see some constraints on there. I don't see the need for 40 feet. Most subdivisions now are 32 feet, and even if you allowed parking one side of the street, you still have parking.
Well, that's the right-of-way is still within that 32 feet.
Yeah, well, 40 feet is the thoroughfare. I mean, I'm trying to discourage high-speed travel.
Exactly. Here comes Mr. Lewis with some help.
While he's doing that, I might briefly, just in terms of the 40-foot right-of-way, I think what the city manager was talking about was, we've got some slopes, we've got some other issues, and the 40-foot right-of-way is make sure there's enough space in there. Once the actual facility is built, whatever remains, you know, it's going to be too narrow to do anything other than function as part of the
Rise
park.
is part of the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. I'm fine.
I suspected he's showing a potential layout in our standard that shows a 40-foot right-of-way with a certain amount of pavement width or whatever.
No, I think he was just clarifying. Can you pop that picture up again, please? Yeah. So in the middle of the screen is the hatched area. That's the unimproved Hiram Avenue, just adjacent to the right of the playground, and then it continues down south. There is a house that you can see on the very bottom right-hand corner. So the entirety of Hiram would not be vacated. There are
Still
homes
some access
that
points,
provide
yes.
that take access off Hiram. So really, it's looking at that hatched area just north of the home in the bottom right corner, then continuing north up to roughly just where the top of the playground area roughly is.
We got somebody's cursor there? Okay.
All right, so that's an existing, just to the bottom of that house on the bottom right-hand corner, they take access off.
Where we can just see the cars a little bit there?
They take
Okay.
access off of Hiram.
Okay.
So that's the property line. That's where Park Place Park starts, on that side of Hiram, on the east side of Hiram. So it's going north from there along the playground. And then you can see where the parking lot is for Park Place Park right off Front Avenue up there. That's the north property line that we're discussing for the 40-foot dedication. So there'd be a section in between there where potentially Hiram could be vacated and limiting that through access.
I think we need to have a really good map so that that's understood, because otherwise it appears that we're vacating the entire portion of Hiram.
Okay.
So the vacation wouldn't come until later. You know, this is
Well, no,
about.
I'm just saying, somebody
Yeah.
would say, oh, we're getting rid of all of this, and, you know, the person down, well, where's the rest, you know, how do I get to my house? So it should be defined, do we have it defined by how much we're proposing to move? So I said, it's always helpful to have a...
This ballot measure is requesting the 40-foot dedication. It's not contemplating the vacation at this point in
Right.
time.
I used the wrong word, I didn't mean vacation. I'm just saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And so if somebody is not familiar with Park Place Park and they don't live in Park Place and they've never been there and they're looking at this, showing it clearly in some sort of a diagram is going to be preferable than all the words. Because we know what you're talking about. Not everybody who's going to be voting. It's not just the people in Park Place who are going to be voting on this. There are going to be other community members who are going to say, well, I don't get that. So what are we proposing to relocate? Are you allowed to put maps in the voters pamphlet?
I don't know.
I don't believe you're allowed to put them in the ballot title, the
No,
caption
not in the
question.
title.
Yeah. I have never seen a map. We've certainly seen images with candidates. You know, I think that'd have to be something we'd explore. But exactly how that reconfiguration of Park Place and Hiram Avenue happens is all comes after the ballot measure. All the ballot measure says is, can we eliminate, can we take 40 feet of current parkland and turn it into right-of-way?
Right. Okay. But we have a very efficient county clerk. Can ask that question. So is there a motion to approve subject to the changes that we made this evening? Oh, excuse me. Come on up, Dee Dee. Yes, please come up.
Green light means it's on, right?
If the light's on, then it's on.
Okay, I'm really embarrassed to say I only heard maybe 95% of what you all said, so I'm going into this whole conversation blind because I'm back there going, Kendall, what are they saying? I didn't even, you were 9A. I walked the park today, and I went with the parks, Kendall and John, and I spoke to 2 tree experts prior because we're talking about heritage trees here that this will affect. A row of 7 high Atlas cedars, which are about the only drought-tolerant cedar in the world. Also, a good, very close to a 300-year-old oak. Rule of thumb is, when you're going to dig into a root to make a road, and I spoke to a tree expert and an arborist that has already visited those trees and wrote a report on them earlier. You take 3 times the diameter of the tree, not the circumference. So now I have a diameter measuring tape. The Atlas cedar is 110 inches in diameter, and the old oak is 119 inches in diameter. So I measured from the base of that trunk towards the road that will be built, from the sideways from the high Atlas cedar, knowing that there's 2 other trees that are going to be gone because they're not valuable trees per se. Every tree is valuable, but these are not necessarily heritage and really unique. But the Atlas and the oaks are. And if you come up, and I asked Kendall, do you honestly think you could pace off where the triple the centimeters, or basically it came to the drip line of the tree, over to where the drainage is, where you're going to put that? I don't even think you have 25 feet you can count off as a road. But then when you come up to make the turn into the actual road, you're cutting straight into the oak roots. What's more important, the trees or this road? Now then I also said, let's just take a look at this. You're probably going to have to move the playground. The playground has drainage, concrete leveling up all around it with curbing. You're going to have to probably move it up and into the park. You're going to have to reset drainage and realign all that, because that's a wet park. The park where you're at is not necessarily really wet. If you take the amount that it'll cost to relocate a playground, do all the drainage and new concrete, what it costs to have attorney fees to take a look at all the verbiage that will put this on the ballot, I think you're at really over half of the price of that lot. And this could improve that lot, take care of this thing if the city would just up the budget, bite the bullet, we should have done back in the 90s. When we said we forgot to dot those I's and cross those T's and buy it back and then. So I would suggest, before you put it on the ballot, do some real crunching of numbers. I think it's going to be almost a washout. You could improve that park tremendously by just getting rid of that dang lot that has flooded the lower neighbors because of the drainage on that road. I think the Public Works and Parks Department can tell you the issues they've had with the drainage on that road. It's not going to get improved. It's only going to get harder. And then you set a precedence of allowing a vote for a park to go through, street to go through the park. We're setting precedents now to our other charter parks. That's what I have to say. We're putting 2 trees up that are heritage trees. It's a very minimal fine to cut them down. So that's neither here nor there, and that would go right back into our general fund. So put that on the bottom line of what it might cost to just buy the lot and be done with it. Thank you very much. But you will kill no less than 1 high Atlas cedar and a 300-year-old oak. It may take a while, but like the other oak in that park, which there's an arborist report that said the reason that oak, we did not nominate it, it was a 300-year-old oak. It was the oldest oak in the park. But we did not nominate it. We supplied an arborist report saying the reason we're not nominating it is because that tree is eventually going to fall over and die because the road was cut into its roots. And it did at the ice storm, just a couple years later. So thank you very much.
So before you head off,
since I'm in the hearing zone, I'll stick around.
So you're suggesting that we not move this ballot measure forward and instead buy the lot?
It will say by the lot, the city. I couldn't hear anything.
Let me say it again. You're suggesting that we not move forward with this ballot measure because if we move the right-of-way, it's going to mess up a whole bunch of heritage trees, and it might be cheaper for us to buy that lot.
Correct. That would be my opinion. It would only enhance the park.
Yeah,
And then we
the
can
thing
get
that-
on with hiking trails and refurbishing that area and
The thing that
native
the staff
undergrowth.
report didn't mention is that, again, we do have a grove of heritage trees in this area, and that's why I kind of asked for this, and I said, well,
Substantial.
where would the road go? You know, if there was the road, where would it be? So,
And
I guess
it
it's,
can't be in a drip line.
yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So that is obviously a consideration. I don't know how much it's going to cost to do this election. I am concerned. I support the park master plan, but I don't want to put in a road at the expense of removal of trees, particularly these that are important to the people in Park Place and important to the park. And we have no other location for this particular vehicular access, or do we? This is pretty much it. So he's nodding yes. This is pretty much it. I like the whole idea of us vacating that portion of Hiram so that we don't have this problem, but I have a problem with putting in a road, not that we would do it, but providing access for this particular piece of property if it's going to mean that we lose trees that we can't replace. So I'm feeling very ambivalent about this now. And then we'd have to move the playground equipment, which is another expense.
Did we not, this lot that Dee Dee's talking about?
We tried through a third
He was an
party.
unwilling seller, wasn't it?
No, the person that we were working with sort of vanished on us.
He wasn't even from the neighborhood.
He was all gung-ho. No, that wasn't that guy. It was the guy that actually lives adjacent. I got in touch with him, talked to him, said that this is what we understand you want to do. Please pursue this. And then after the third conversation, he has never returned one single phone call. City manager tried to get a hold of him. It just disappeared off the face of the earth. So I don't know what happened. The person that was promoting it was a person that actually lives in your neighborhood and suggested he knew this person, and this person was, and I talked to him at the Park Place neighborhood meeting.
And all these trees are on
The
the
heritage.
park's property,
Yes.
or
and they're-
on city property.
Yes, and they're heritage trees. We've been designated by the city,
They're
and
not on
the commission approved them.
Yeah.
Not this one, but a previous commission.
And they're in the route where the road would be if it was built.
Yes, it would affect, as Dee Dee stated, several of these trees adversely.
And the reason we would have to move the playground is what?
Well, it's too close to where the road might be.
Just as a safety matter.
Well, yeah, you don't want to have a
I-
playground like,
Yeah,
20
that's
feet.
why, it's a safety matter.
yes, yeah.
So are we giving direction to staff to try to reestablish contact with the landowner and see if we can?
I think that's a great, I just, right now, there's too many bad trade-offs for something, and I realize nobody is here from the Park Place neighborhood, but I have been to their meetings, I have heard this for years and years and years about this, and maybe they weren't aware that this was on the agenda, but I just, right now, I appreciate all the work the staff has done, knowing that we have these adverse effects that we can't correct. I'm reluctant to recommend that we move this forward. I think we have to go back and I think that's a great idea that she proposed.
I'm lost for the moment. What's the great idea? That we reestablish contact
Yes.
with the landowner and try to buy the property.
Yes.
What's the physical size of that property? Trying to get a feel for what the dollars would be.
Bring all this other stuff up to us.
We don't need that answer tonight. I mean, it's something that, if this commission feels we should make that attempt, I'm fine with that.
Why don't you make a motion and make that subject to, that we're going to not do this right now?
I'll put it out there for purposes of a vote, that we delay approval of this agenda item and give direction to staff to attempt to reestablish contact with the landowner and see if the sale of that property is an alternative. Does that suffice?
Yep, I'll second if that's a motion.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
and Mayor Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, on to Resolution 2303. The Urban Renewal Commission made a recommendation on this, or actually not a recommendation, they approved this resolution, so what is our pleasure?
I move to approve Resolution Number 23-03, calling for an election on May 16, 2023, to forward the question of approving the borrowing of funds by the Urban Renewal Agency to the electors of Oregon City.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
Mayor Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
All right, item 9C, presentation and discussion of potential code amendments to previously adopted Middle Housing Code Package Number 2, and I'm not going to read all the legislative file numbers.
Hi, yeah, good evening. Christina will be presenting the staff
Thank you,
report tonight.
Christina.
Mayor McGriff, Commissioners. As you recall, in May and June of 2022, the City Commission adopted code for HB 2001, which is our Middle Housing Code Amendments. The City Commission continued the file to the October 24th Planning Commission hearing to discuss additional policy topics and look at any potential technical revisions. Our Planning Commission, and actually give me 1 second.
Yep,
Clicker's right behind your laptop, actually.
we need help.
Can't see, it was behind, sorry. It was, there we go. Okay. The Planning Commission has been spending the last 6 or 7 meetings discussing various policy topics as well as technical revisions. These technical revisions were presented in December and then formally forwarded onto the City Commission at the January 9th Planning Commission meeting. What the Planning Commission has chosen to do is separate out the policy questions with the code revisions. They felt that it was important to move these code revisions further in the process because there is need for clarification of code for our existing policy, as well as there is at least one applicant who's in the building permit process waiting for these code revisions. There's a work session scheduled in March with the Planning Commission to further discuss the policy questions, but what you have in front of you this evening are the technical revisions. These revisions do not create new policy, but clarify existing policy and fix any code errors that happened this last summer. This slide goes over what I just said, and I apologize, this was a slide from the last meeting. The tentative first reading of these technical revisions are next City Commission meeting, which is February 15th. So there are 3 topics I'd like to go over this evening. Setbacks in the commercial districts, driveways, and townhome middle housing land division code. Since this packet was sent out, we re-reviewed our modification versus administrative variance process, and I have some additional red lines that I will provide to the City Commission as slides at the end of this presentation, and those will be added in the packet that will be in front of you for a first reading. And I'm available for any questions that you may have as we go through this presentation. Okay. So in Oregon City, in our commercial districts, we have a 5-foot maximum setback. And the reason we have that is this, through the Type 2 site plan and design review process, we start with commercial buildings and multifamily buildings to be closer to the street. And then through the site plan and design review process, we look at providing additional pedestrian amenities as they move farther back. Parking lots and drive aisles are not allowed between the building face and the street. So through our traditional Type 2 process, we start with the 5-foot setback, and through an applicant's proposal, they're allowed to place a building farther back. In this process in June, we, because the rest of the middle housing products, duplex, quadplex, triplex, cluster housing, and townhomes, because of state law, were required to be a Type 1 clear and objective housing process. We took what was previously processed through a Type 2 notice, where you could, through that process, allow an applicant to choose the right location for their project. Because we went through a Type 1 process without allowing a modification to that 5-foot maximum, applicants who request for middle housing in our commercial districts, so that would be like Malala Avenue, are stuck with having to put their middle housing at 5 feet or receive a planning commission variance. So we realized that there was a hole in our code through the technical revisions, and what we are proposing is middle housing projects located in commercial districts are not subject to the 5-foot setback rule. And so that is kind of the main code revision. We also, previously in your packet, have had a modification process that we put into the duplex and middle housing design standards. We've recently learned that there actually is an administrative variance allowance for middle housing design standards, and I'll walk you through these new code red lines. The next topic is townhomes and middle housing land division. Through this process, I've actually been tracking with the Department of Land Conservation and Development some further refinement on direction about how cities can limit the number of townhomes allowed to go through the middle housing land division process. Initially, we were told that we had to allow townhomes to go through the middle housing land division process, but we're not giving direction on the ability to limit how many. And as you recall in this conversation with middle housing last year, we really saw it as two processes. You either were a small infill project where you went through a building permit process and you were building an infill project where improvements were really the frontage in front of you. A larger subdivision process where you might have many, many lots of middle housing would be reviewed through our Type 2 subdivision process, where we had lots of code that could look at utilities, street connections, and so forth. Having middle housing with townhome project with many, many units, more than 4, was not the right place. Hearing from the Department of Land Conservation and Development that we can limit middle housing land division townhomes to 4 greatly separates what we consider infill, Type 1 building permit, and a more traditional subdivision application. And we do review subdivision townhome applications in this city, and we have code for that.
So the project that was done at South End and Lawton would be more of the subdivision type process.
Yeah. Most likely, if you're going to have a 4-unit townhome infill, that then you could do a middle housing land division and sell out each of the units. It really is a 4-plex, but it might look like a townhome process. And so that would be allowed, and we've heard from the state we can cap middle housing land division for townhome development at 4 units. And so the code red line is very simple in that package. It says 4 units max for middle housing land division for townhomes.
4 units or fewer?
Fewer. And finally, driveways. As we move forward with code revisions last spring, we were working with Development Services on better understanding how many driveways we could permit through middle housing, understanding some of the existing policies that they had with related to driveways in arterial and collector streets, and really a need to look at safe spacing and when we could require developments to have shared driveways. And so there is a memo from Josh Wheeler, Assistant City Engineer, that looked at kind of all those safety topics and kind of existing policies relates to existing right-of-way permits for driveways. And we have codified some of those existing policies and further refined, really with clear and objective standards, what you can and cannot do for middle housing. So for example, if you can have one driveway for every 2 units. So if you have a triplex, you could have potentially 2 driveways on your property, and if you have a 4plex, you can have 2. There's spacing between the 2 driveways, as well as requirements for driveways and collector arterials not to have backup movements. So if you had a middle housing project on Malala Avenue, you'd have to design your project in order for your driveway to be oriented that you are not backing into traffic. So these were existing policies, but we've now codified them to provide clear direction to middle housing development.
Would that allow for someone to put the driveways in the back?
They could if there's an option, but if there is no option, we provide direction on the location, the separation between driveways. Of course, you want to make sure you have separation enough that you're providing safe for pedestrian crossings and safety for reducing car conflicts that are going from the driveways to the street.
So how does this work? I'm hoping we're going to go back and take each one of these individually, but what I'm having some heartburn about is we're talking about in those 2 particular districts, we, again, as I say about industrial land, they're not making it anymore. We don't have a whole lot of commercial land either, and are we wanting to encourage all of our commercially zoned land to be utilized for housing? Unless there's some other component involved with it, but if it's just strictly housing, and we are looking for places for people to go with with a business that would fit under that zoning category, then we're using it all up. So where's the balance?
Yeah, and I know that was a conversation in the Equitable Housing Project that happened a couple years ago. There are some very small lots on Malala Avenue with existing homes, and what's that balance of acknowledging that not every lot on I'm using Malala as an example, but not every lot on Malala is going to turn into a mixed-use project, and rather than having, providing additional middle housing options to some of these smaller lots, may be able to provide more housing opportunity for smaller units for Oregon City residents. And so I think how we've set it up is you are allowed to do one middle housing project on a lot. You cannot have your parking between your building and the street, and any driveway needs to be associated so you are turning around on your property. But since the Equitable Housing Project, we have allowed middle housing in our commercial districts. So we, in the June 2000 House Bill 2001 code update, we kept with our existing city policy.
Is that without a commercial component?
Yes, we allowed it without a commercial component as part of the Equitable Housing update.
Yeah, it seems to me that particularly like along Malala Avenue, having some commercial opportunities provides a nice buffer to the residential uses behind, so that you don't get that traffic and noise and all of that.
Yeah. And I think that was that balance, right, between acknowledging that there are these smaller infill lots which may never get changed over to commercial or mixed use, and how do we provide more opportunities for investment along Malala Avenue, but knowing that not everything would be commercial. I think that was that balanced conversation we had in kind of 2017 through 19. Any additional questions about driveways before I move forward?
So do you want to back up and get our consensus about each of the items?
I have one more topic.
One more,
Would it be
okay.
either finish all 3 and then we can go back to each slide? Okay. And the final one is this relates to the first topic, and I'll go back. This is the middle housing setback in commercial districts. As we look, we initially created a modification process in order to, allow development to provide alternates that were allowed in the code because we did not have a modification process. And what we found as we did more review of our code is we actually did create, and I'm going to go to this slide and I'll work backward. We actually already have administrative variance to middle housing design standards in our variance chapter. We have some of our old definitions of middle housing, and so this was not caught in June. So what you see in this slide is just grammar changes to refer to our new grammar for middle housing, and as well as adding cluster homes, which were not part of this. I'm going to go back. In your packet today, we had built in a modification process. So if we have a modification process and a variance process, an applicant would need to meet 2 criteria. So we're requesting to remove the modification process and just direct people to the administrative variance criteria, which exists today. So what you see on your screen, sorry, my eyes are not very good. What you see in red is our requested change, which just directs people to the administrative chapter 17.60 variance chapter, which provides the criteria within that chapter. The modification standards that we had initially put in the chapter will be removed because they're no longer needed. And they will direct people, if you are requesting a modification to a design standard for middle housing or single-family housing, we are directing people back to our variance chapter. So it's a little convoluted. We created a modification process. We realized we duplicated a process. We're taking that away and directing people to the existing variance process, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So I can go back to start with the first topic. And answer any questions the City Commission may have.
All right, take it away.
One thing that isn't mentioned on the slide, this talks about the variance, or excuse me, the front yard setback. Mm-hmm. But you're also suggesting that in the MUC district, they don't have to comply with the minimum density, but in the MUD district, they do.
Yeah, and the reason
why... And I'm having a little struggle why we would treat those 2 districts differently.
What we found in the mixed-use corridor district is there's some very odd lots or small lots, and if you are an existing single-family home, and let's say you want to add an additional unit and you're on Malala Avenue and you may have a larger lot, maybe you're maybe a 1970s ranch home on Malala Avenue, and you just want to add an extra unit, you probably won't meet the density standards to add an additional unit to your property. It's permitted by the zone, but your lot's probably too big because of our density standards are really related to the high-density residential. Which I don't have it, I think it's 17.2 units per acre. And so just kind of adding an additional unit, if you are a existing house, we would have to deny you your proposal because it wasn't a big enough development proposal. But kind of that incremental adding of homes, it would not be allowed if we required a minimum density standard for any proposal.
Well, couldn't that same thing happen in the MUD district?
That's true. There's just less opportunity for this incremental one more unit. There are less existing single-family homes in the mixed-use downtown zone, whereas there are a fair amount in our mixed-use corridor district.
I guess I still don't understand why we would treat them differently. If we want to be able to allow somebody in the MUC district to add 1 unit, why wouldn't we allow somebody in the MUD district to add 1 unit?
We could. I think the number of lots where that would be applicable was just dramatically less. And so it didn't seem a need to change an existing policy where there were a fair amount of lots on Malala Avenue. But it's something the commission could just decide they want to do.
I think the 2 districts are actually fundamentally different because mixed-use commercial is not the mixed-use downtown district, and we're talking about the downtown district, where you're less likely to have these, you're not going to really have too many places where there's homes on a lot. If you look at what our existing inventory is in that particular district, you're more likely to have it in the MUC than the MUD.
Okay, but I still don't understand why we don't treat the two districts. They're both mixed-use districts.
Right. One's downtown, one is not.
I think one's also...
One's downtown and one's corridor.
Right.
But I just don't understand why we're...
I think also the mixed-use...
There's probably not enough lots for me to be worrying about.
Yeah, the mixed-use downtown is also a regional center, and so it's trying to stay away from our regional center, and reducing density requirements in regional center wasn't something we thought was prudent, knowing there was so little number of lots that may be applicable.
Well, if Commissioner Mitchell wants to propose a change, I'm amenable.
Well, again, I don't understand why, if someone owns a residential home in the MUD district, we would allow them, MUC, we would allow them to add one unit if it didn't hit the minimum density. But we would not allow the same person in the mixed-use downtown to do the same thing.
You know,
Just
it's really,
as a matter of fairness to me.
I think this is just a more conservative approach, but if the commission wants to look at both, it's something they can do.
For me, the whole difference between the two districts, I didn't really even bring in the idea of the regional center. I'm looking at the way that the downtown district looks, which is way different than, we've got certain height of buildings, we've got buildings like right up to the sidewalk and the curb, and the only place I can think of is where there's some houses are probably on 14th Street, which have been rehabilitated, and I don't see them going anywhere at this point in time. There are two, or I think all of them are designated, or at least one of them is designated as a historic landmark. There's another historic house further down on 17th, which is undergoing some review. That's pretty much it in that, oh, excuse me, the ones right near the end of the Oregon Trail. And I'm thinking at this point in time, we probably don't want to have any more units there, but that on Abernathy might be an exception.
Right, and multifamily and higher density is an allowed use. This is really that allowing a little incremental development. It's like, do we want a little bit, or are we going to wait for the perfect? And I think that's what the Planning Commission was looking at on Molalla Avenue specifically. And a little bit in the McLaughlin District as well.
I don't think anybody's going to die on their sword, but if you want to make a motion and make them the same, then...
Yeah, I'll make that motion to exempt MUC and MUD from the minimum density requirement.
I'll second it.
Commissioner Adam Morrow?
No.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell?
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
No.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell?
Aye.
Mayor Denise McGriff?
No.
Motion does not pass.
So they're going to stay separate. Okay, next one.
Any questions about townhomes and middle housing land division?
My only question about that is that if we're talking about these being on a local street, I'm just concerned about the number of additional driveways.
I'm sorry.
Additional driveways, curb cuts.
Yeah, and I think with our driveway standard, a 4-unit townhome would be allowed 2 driveways with a 20-foot separation. So you're really looking at sharing 2 units sharing a driveway and 2 units sharing a driveway.
Okay. All right.
And then any question about our proposed code amendments to clarify middle housing with driveways?
I don't. Okay, so, that's the last one, or one more?
And then any questions about removing the recently proposed modification process and just directing applicants to go to the existing variance code?
I think if this cleans this up and makes it easier for you all, then we should support that, rather than having a duplicate that's conflicting in the code.
I agree.
We have a motion to approve and adopt the recommendations as, yes, one more question, go ahead.
Well, I'm just looking for some advice here. I have concerns with two items that are in the cottage cluster section, but are not being proposed for a red line change.
Okay.
And I don't know whether or not now is the right time to be bringing that up, or whether we should clear this up.
Bring it up.
Bring it up?
Yep.
Okay.
But, Angelique, could you open up the middle housing design chapter that's attached to the packet today?
I think it's Exhibit 3.
This one?
Yes.
Yeah. Go to page 10 of 13. Okay, Common Courtyard Design Standards, E to AI.
Can you?
Common courtyard has a minimum dimension of 15 feet. And a cottage home cluster is 4 to 14 homes, right?
I think so, either 4 to 12 or 4 to 14, I can't
Okay.
at this moment remember.
So a common courtyard, elsewhere in here it says that there has to be 10 feet between the buildings. So maybe with 4 homes, maybe 15 feet makes sense. But to me, when you get up to 8, 10, 12 cottage homes, a 15-foot wide common area isn't a common area. It's a hallway.
Yeah.
So I would like to see,
Like it's
and I don't have
scaled?
an exact number in mind, but somewhere, if it's over 8 units, that common courtyard has to get proportionally wider.
Or would you rather have it scaled, it goes up per unit, or there's just a little version and a big version?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't have the perfect answer, I don't think, but I know that a 15-foot wide common area for 14 cluster homes is not a common area.
A lot of the middle housing was really dictated by the Oregon administrative rules. I don't think this was, so let me do, after this meeting, I can do a quick check to make sure that it's an area that we can provide additional direction on. If this is something the city commission is interested in, I can provide those red lines with the first reading packet.
I think you bring up a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think you would like to see that.
Okay, and like at 8 units, something, what are you thinking regarding the slightly larger, kind of for 8 to the max? 8 units, kind of the bigger version?
A wider, a bigger minimum dimension.
Like, just,
The 150 square feet per unit, I think that's probably in the rules. I'm just saying the shape of that.
Are you thinking more like 25
8?
feet?
What?
Why did you pick 8?
Threw that
I didn't.
out.
I just threw that out.
Oh, do that out.
Yeah.
Could be any.
Yeah.
I just want some direction so I know what to write for the,
Because it seems to me if you have 7 and you've got that, as you're describing it, a hallway corridor, what could you do with that? I mean,
Right.
Does it become an area where junk gets put in it? It's not going to be landscaping, you know?
no, the common area does have minimum landscaping requirements.
Well, yeah, but I mean, what happens with that 15-foot area?
Sorry. So the cottage courtyard the size is based on the how many units, but I think what Commissioner Mitchell is saying is you could have it really, really long, like you could have all the units have a very skinny green that meets the size number, the size is big, but it's skinny. So as the development scales up, maybe the width gets more like 25-foot minimum width rather than 15? Is that kind of what you're?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a great development in San Jose that's called Handshake Park that reminds me of, well, it's a 1930s cluster development. There's a walkway down the center, the driveway's in the back, and it's like a U shape, like you see those old apartment complexes.
Yeah.
And there is about 20 feet or more between each of the housing units, because they're single-family dwellings that are built in a bungalow style. It's on the National Register. You should probably look it up, because I went to see it. It's pretty awesome.
You can do, even if you had a 12-unit cluster, you could do 3 sets of smaller ones, so you still could have the smaller width, but you'd have to separate and have 3 separate. You could create multiple clusters within a proposal.
You could. That could be done.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't have an answer. I just don't want to see
I'm just looking for
12 or
direction.
14 units on a 15-foot wide common area. I don't think that's the purpose.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Yes.
So the maximum number of units in a cottage cluster is 12.
12, okay.
So what if we said, 6 and above, then you have a minimum dimension of 30 feet? We just double it. If you've got more than 6, so I guess it's under 6, it's 15. Over that, it's twice the size.
I think it's something may need to be studied a little. We may need to think about it more than just throw a number out tonight.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to discourage. I happen to believe in cottage clusters. I think done right, I think they're great. So I don't want to discourage being able to build them by coming up with the wrong number tonight.
Yeah. And I do know when you get to the smaller infill Tetris design and you're trying to fit everything in, those dimensions really matter when you have to fit it all in. So the smaller things, it makes sense. But what's the break when you get to a larger proposal?
I think the goal is access and usability, right?
Yes.
Yep.
So
A
without
true
throwing
common
a hard
area that
number.
can be used by
Yeah.
the residents for something other than.
Not
walking
some
between
stripper,
one
you and I have to put our barbecues in this thing.
Yeah, right. The other one's easier, I promise.
Okay.
On page 11 of 13, J9, it's talking about garages. Garages shall not abut common spaces, garage doors of 20 feet or less in width. And I assume that's supposed to say, and shall not exceed 200 square feet of gross floor area. So if you put a 20-foot wide garage door on a 200 square foot garage, it's 10 feet deep. So we don't want 20-foot wide garage doors, I think, unless we're saying that 2-car garages are okay, and then that would have to be 400 square feet.
Yeah, and I think, is this related also to, we allow detached, you could have a cluster with like a detached parking for multiple units?
Right, but I think on the attached portion, it would only be a 10-foot wide garage door and a 200 square foot garage.
What?
Because 20 feet and 200 feet don't go together.
Right. So it would be a 10-foot garage door instead of 20.
Yeah.
I can make that change.
So yeah, I promised that one would be easier.
So I will come back with a proposal for the cottage cluster for the first reading, along with that amendment related to the clarification of the garage door size and the code revisions to direct people to the administrative variance process.
Do we have a motion on the other items? Except for what's coming back? We need a motion for them to move forward and get this finalized.
Well, I'll move to, it just went away, sorry. Move to approve the potential code amendments to the previously adopted middle housing code with the open items that we've discussed this evening.
Second.
Commissioner Adam Morrow,
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell,
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith,
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell,
Aye.
and Mayor Denise McGriff.
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll look forward to seeing you yet once again. All right, the next item is a presentation, 2022-23 Street Tree Minor Code Amendment Project. I think, is that Jude?
Yes, that will be Jude Tudeus, who's going to present this minor amendment to our street tree code.
Mayor McGriff, Oregon City Commissioners. My name is Jude Tudeus, and I'm Assistant Planner for the Community Development Department here. And I'm here to present the 2022-23 Street Tree Minor Code Amendment. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Okay, so in June 2022, the Natural Resources Committee, in consultation with Development Services, recommended amendments to our residential street tree code. And in August of 2022, this body directed the Planning Division to initiate a public information process about those recommended code changes. In the fall, planning followed through with a webpage dedicated to the project, including a page where the public could submit comments, e-trail news and trail news articles, and then toured the project through the Citizen Involvement Committee, Natural Resource Committee, and the Planning Commission to garner their feedback. And today, I'm here to present to you the feedback that we received and request your direction on next steps. So the current process needs maybe a little bit of explanation. Subdivisions prior to 2001 developed planter strips that were often too narrow for the trees that were planted in them, and indeed too narrow for many tree species to thrive. Root systems would encroach on and lifted sidewalks, creating mobility hazards, especially for people with disabilities. Currently, property owners can apply for a tree removal permit. For trees shown to lift the sidewalk, they're required to replace those trees on a one-for-one basis, according to the newly adopted Street Tree Species Code, or species list, excuse me, or they pay a $391 fee in lieu of replacement per tree that they were required to replant. Public Works created a grant program to assist property owners in repairing and replacing sidewalks, and in the last year alone, the program reimbursed 78 property owners a total of $196,000 to replace sidewalks lifted by tree roots. The average homeowner compensation was $2,500. The grant program limits compensation for property owners to $1,500 per site, so that $196,000 figure doesn't capture what those property owners had to pay out of pocket on top of what the grant reimbursed. And then I was reliably informed by Josh Wheeler in Public Works that the average 5x5 sidewalk pad costs between $500 and $1,000 to replace. So our new process involves a no replanting requirement in planting strips 3 feet wide or less, no fee in lieu of replanting. However, we'll still encourage replanting according to the new street tree species list, and the Natural Resources Committee recommended we advise owners who do wish to replant to water their planting strips deeply to reduce the risk of root migration under sidewalks as they seek moisture in often better watered yards across the sidewalk. We also needed to clarify an existing code omission for replacement of dead, diseased, and hazardous trees, requiring their replacement trees to be 1.5 inches in caliber, 6 inches above the root crown or greater. The anticipated impact is a streamlined permitting process, eliminated replanting costs, reduced future demand on the sidewalk replacement grant program, reduced future risk of infrastructure damage, and reduced risk of sidewalk mobility hazards going forward. So we also are proposing a change to the draft code red line that was submitted as Exhibit 1. and we're adding in residential areas to the end of 1208.035C. The goal of the policy, as the Natural Resources Committee recommended it, was to reduce the impacts of sidewalk buckling in residential areas. However, due to the importance of street trees to areas like downtown Oregon City and other commercial corridors, exempting such areas was not a part of the NRC discussion, so specifying that the replanting exemption is only for residential zones prevents unintended impacts on non-residential zones. So what did the community say? Well, we registered a 3-to-1 in favor ratio, with some comments more effusive than others. As you can see, one of the comments was just, this is a needed change. One of the main comment against was that not requiring replanting is sort of a way of codifying what's already happening in real life, and that not replanting would make certain corridors look goofy, was the terminology, I think. So that kind of, what I show on the slide here kind of sums up the variety of different reactions that we got through the website. And then what our committees and commissions said is that the Planning Commission and CIC had general tree removal process questions, which is part of why I sort of unpacked those a little bit earlier. And they had questions about how much sidewalk replacements cost, which is why I came armed with that information to this meeting, in case you had those questions. And they were curious about if sidewalks can be remade to run around root beds, and several property owners have chosen to do exactly that for their sidewalk replacements. Planning Commission had additional concerns with questions about why this is necessary with the other mitigation options that are provided to property owners. And conversely, another planning commissioner was concerned about these new smaller trees that we're allowing in 3-foot planter strips maybe being short enough to create sightline issues. And so those kind of concerns kind of weigh against each other in circumstances where property owners who may not have an ideal situation to replant wouldn't have to. The NRC also had some new ideas to add when this was presented. They again wanted us to encourage replanting according to the new street tree species list that was adopted in August. They wanted us to better communicate strategies to property owners to help prevent root migration under sidewalks. And they wanted us to explore the idea of replacing street trees with pollinator gardens for folks that were interested in that. My presentation came right after the Bee City USA presentation to NRC, and so I think those thoughts were kind of connected to one another. But they brought that up as a thought worth exploring, and the Planning Commission also concurred that that's a thought worth exploring down the line. So ultimately, given public comment and commission and committee feedback, how should we move forward? At your direction, we can bring back an ordinance to adopt the new code at the February 15th commission meeting, or you can direct us to get more information or introduce refinements to the policy before advancing an ordinance, or you can direct us to no longer pursue the code amendment. And that's my presentation.
Gentlemen, comments? Questions? You don't need to turn the light on. It drives me crazy.
I guess I don't have any issues with the changes that are provided in the red lines. I just am curious about a lot of those comments in some of your slides have no connection to those red lines. So I guess I'm not sure how those fit in.
You mean the code red lines and their correlation to our public comments?
Yes.
I believe the red lines were generated before we got those public comments.
Okay. I guess I'm wondering why we included the public comments if they have no connection to the red lines. We're voting on the red lines, not. I guess what I'm asking is, are you coming to us in the future to address some of these comments that were listed in the slideshow, because those don't connect to this.
Right. I think the purpose was just to sort of make you aware of the public sort of attitude about these code amendments, just in general, as kind of an informational presentation on the feedback that we received.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm curious as to new development, what are they doing about these planter strips? What is the requirement for them?
I believe it's 5 feet.
Yes.
They are
4.5, yeah,
5
4.5,
feet.
yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure we aren't opening ourselves up to a barren landscape.
Right. Since 2001, the code changed to require 4.5-foot plus planter strips in new developments.
I can say that I've never been a fan of, if you put a tree in your front yard, you have to put it on your title or whatever it's called, register it.
The covenant,
What is it?
the requirement or the option to have a covenant on
Yeah.
your private property.
Wasn't there a registration fee involved with that?
There is too, a recording fee.
A recording fee?
Yeah,
At the
to record
county.
it with the county. Yeah.
That doesn't go to us. That
No,
goes-
no, but how much was that? Do you recall? Was it $75?
I think it's in the $90 range.
I was never a fan of that, but let's not be on
They
our
charge per
$8.
page.
a
Yeah.
page. I think it was $93. Did you have something else, Rocky?
Just the one comment that stuck out with me is the sidewalks meandering around trees. I hope we're not going there.
We have one at the Holmes house. We went.
I understand that,
We went around our
but,
heritage tree.
In the past, we have meandered sidewalks to avoid killing trees and cut the new sidewalks that killed the trees anyway, and then had to, and then what you have is no trees anyway, and meandering sidewalks that don't match the block frontage that they're on, and it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I think Public Works would oversee the mobility standards that are affected by sidewalk meandering and that sort of thing.
But
So,
I think they've overseen it in the past, and we still have this problem.
Yeah, the purpose of this amendment was really just kind of a very surgical change to implement what the NRC had recommended when they went through their street tree review and process list. So when they came up with that list, this was one of the outcomes of that. Acknowledging that there are other concerns with street trees and sidewalks, but
I know, but none of those had any effect on these red lines.
Okay. Go ahead.
I would like to see us explore the possibility of allowing pollinator gardens. I would like to hear more about it, not that I'm completely sold on it at this moment, but I think that's an intriguing idea, and I would like to have that brought back.
I don't have any objection to that being brought back. But a pollinator garden is great, but I'm not sure how it replaces the tree. One of my biggest concerns about this is that how do these changes help us reduce climate change? I have always been against the fee in lieu, and I want to know why it's $391. Where did that you don't know that because you weren't here. So where did that come from?
So the research that I found, what I was able to dig up is that was the cost of actually planting a tree, the cost of the tree, and doing the labor associated with it. It wasn't the 391, whatever it was at the time was the cost to actually do the planting, and then it's been,
I think you said in
increased
your
over
report it
time.
was $391. Okay, so I think number one, that is too low. I would like us to see it higher. I think the fee in lieu should be the last option. We are allowing people to not replant trees and then they get planted someplace else. Again, I bring up the example of the south side of Washington Street from 7th, which has been completely denuded of large trees. And the whole area is going to be hotter than Hades this summer because there's no trees to shade the street, to keep the temperature down. I would really like us to revisit that. I don't think that helps us with climate change. The other questions I have are on this section, and I had this section before, was there's no definition for a registered arborist, and what does it mean and approved by the city? So who is the city is am I approving it? Are you approving it? who is the city? Is it Community Development Department? Is it a staff person? I don't know who that is. And then talks here about, no replacement or approval without approval of an arborist. Again, I don't know who that is. And then down on the table, we have a certified arborist, then we have a registered arborist. Is there a difference between a registered arborist? I don't know these. I don't know what that is. So I looked up our definitions, and we don't have definitions for what those folks are. And I know that we're talking about getting a forester, but I still think we need to define that so that when people are going out getting these professionals to help them, that they know what that means. Probably the industry probably knows, maybe Pete knows. Well, he's gone. So, so that needs to be clarified. I don't have any issue with the reduction. I just think that if you can plant a tree, they should plant a tree, and they should not be able to get off with $391, whatever that number is. So I would really like to see, I would be willing to support approving this, subject to getting some of these answers, and look at changing that fee. I know it sounds really harsh, but I don't think it costs $391 to replace a tree. I think if you go out and buy one and you don't go through the Friends of Trees program, I don't think it's I think it's way more than $391. I think it's probably in excess of, you get a nice tree, even a small one. I think it's more than that. And again, we should be encouraging people to replant as opposed to giving them an out by saying you can pay $400 or whatever the number is and you don't have to plant a tree. Because it doesn't help us with climate change. And I know that climate-friendly community stuff is coming eventually, and somehow or another we have to reconcile these things. This all fits together.
Yeah. I did want to mention that to the certified arborist question that you had, the way that the code is written can obviously be updated to make things clearer, but the way that the policy is enforced in the planning department when we receive a tree removal application is they have to have an ISA certified arborist report, like a certification license number from an ISA certified arborist. And so that's what we look for when we receive a certified arborist report.
So why don't we just put that in the definition, so that's what we mean? And then, is that the same thing as a registered arborist up in section A?
That's a good question. I have been taught to interpret those interchangeably.
Okay, so if we mean certified, then let's just change them to mean the same thing.
Yep.
Because if they're certified, they have to be registered, but maybe they can be registered but not certified. I don't know. So
right.
I'm trying to think like somebody who doesn't know this code.
Right.
And what would they be looking at? It's not clear. And then there was the approval by the city. So is that staff, Aquila? Same line says, a diseased or hazardous street tree as determined by a registered arborist and approved by the city.
Yes, that's the staff.
Okay?
I mean, that's how we've been administering the program.
It should be clarified. I don't know, I mean, if I'm a citizen, the city, who's the city?
Okay, we can look into that. I think that in other places, if we mean something other than staff, we'd say through this type 1 process or type 2, or, the city commission must approve kind of thing.
Okay. I was going to go back to our definitions if we define what that is. Again, that would be where I'd be looking. Okay, what do they mean by that? So we just need to get our terms straight and not have inconsistencies if we're talking about who are we wanting to review this, and who is the approval, and what professionals. Because as I said earlier, when the natural resources folks were here, I have a concern about, what I have seen in the last 2 years is that the arborist comes in, they work for company XYZ, so again, it's a self-repeating prophecy and it's self-serving, and I just don't think they're being objective when they're saying, oh, this tree needs to be removed. because they're getting the contract to remove the tree. And maybe that wasn't their intent, but that's how it looks to somebody from the outside. And I've seen that. There were some trees that there was no reason why they needed to be removed. They got an arborist to say it was removed, and then 2 months later, they put up solar panels. So, not good. And these were large trees. These were not small trees.
I did want to mention, too, that along 7th and along Malala, I think a lot of those areas are zoned MUC, and so they wouldn't be impacted by this code change. They'd still be required to replant in those cases.
And the city and the Public Works Department did a fantastic job replacing those trees that were damaged by the ice storm, and thank you, thank you.
I just want to say I agree with Mayor McGriff's comment. I've always thought that fee in lieu was a very poor second choice to tree replacement. So I would like to see us look at how we can encourage tree replacement and discourage fee in lieu.
Make the fee high enough, it's going to be discouraging. Did you want to say something?
Yes, because I agree, but I'm also trying to remember back to a presentation I saw, and I think there was an example given about some people in the McLaughlin neighborhood who wanted to have the fee in lieu, not that we would be getting rid of it, but to have it at its rate because there were existing trees that they felt should be factored in. What, if someone could refresh me on that, if they remember, that would be great. The reasonings for...
I don't think we should get rid of it, but I think we should, as Commissioner Mitchell said, it should be the last option. It should be the last option, and if we need to raise the fee to discourage that, because I think that planting a tree is far better for our community in the long term, and we're thinking about long term. We're not thinking about short-term gain or, gee, I don't like to sweep up leaves, or, you know, I hate trees, or whatever the reason is, that should be the last option.
So just for clarification, so I think there's general consensus for creating this exception for planter strips that are 3 feet or less in residential areas. But in addition to that, you'd like to see an increased fee in lieu, what that may look like. You'd like to see what it could look like to have pollinator gardens planted in the planter strip.
In those small, narrow ones.
Okay, and we need to define what a certified and/or registered arborist is, and who do we mean by the city in terms of being able to approve this?
I think your staff was suggesting that we just change it all to certified, because if that's what we're talking about, then it should be consistent all the way through. If we mean a certified arborist, then we don't want to use the word registered arborist. That's just confusing.
Okay. Does that,
Yes.
did I get everything? Okay.
So I'm remembering now, I think it was Christina who gave a presentation about this. And again, I want to say that I agree. I don't want people to be cutting down their trees left and right and to have a low barrier to doing so. But what I'm remembering in a presentation given was that there were concerns from people in the McLaughlin neighborhood who have those 3 feet planter strips, if anything at all. And with the next alternative being a replanting, there were concerns because of the limited size of the yards and the ability to find a place to put that, so that if we were to increase the fee, that would put an undue burden on the people who have planter strips that just can't support a street tree, and also have yards that are too small to accommodate for a replanting, which would then force them to the next level, which was paying a fee, which we're discussing about increasing. So because of that, and it's coming back to me, I would not support increasing that, even though I agree with the reasonings that you're bringing up for the concern over this.
We have a meeting coming up, and I will check with my neighborhood association about that particular thing. I remember what you're talking about. I think that's going to be the exception, not the rule.
Well, and I think to clarify, from what I know, in the McLaughlin neighborhood, a lot of those planter strips are 3 feet or less
Yeah.
because it's older part of town. And so they would be eligible for this exception. So if we were to increase the fee in lieu, it would apply to maybe a newer subdivision who's got, 4 feet or more, who's taking out a tree and trying to pay the fee in lieu rather than replanting. But for somebody at older part of town with a smaller planter strip, they would have this exception. And that's kind of where the NRC was going with that as well, because in some of the older parts of town, there's a lot of trees in people's yards, and they don't necessarily have more room to plant another tree. So that's, I think, where some of that feeling was coming from of maybe an undue burden in just an older, more established part of town.
So this would be the exemption for the McLaughlin area.
Okay.
I did want to note as well, I did a survey of tree removal and replanting applications that were given a certain replanting deadline, and none of those applications in those with 3-foot planter strips were in McLaughlin. They were actually all in Park Place, Caulfield, Gaffney Lane, and South End. They were pretty well bunched. There were about 30 or 40 of them, and they were bunched in sort of clusters in the south side of the city and up in Park Place. So a lot of those subdivisions that came in the 1990s in particular.
So you're talking about newer Park Place. When I think of Park Place, I said, well, they don't really have curbs and sidewalks, so where's the plant? There's no planting strip.
Right, so
You're
like...
talking about the newer the later subdivisions.
Yeah, the 1990s subdivisions, the subdivisions that came in right before we required 4.5-foot planter strips in 2001. So those areas are the ones that are popping sidewalks like crazy right now.
I was trying to remember, I was just up in Barlow Crest, and I was trying to think if I saw any street trees in there. I know in your neighborhood, there's some nice street trees.
Less now than there were, or fewer now than there were a couple of
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are still some nice
Yeah.
ones.
Okay. So would you like us to approve everything subject with those additions coming?
I mean, I think we got what we need in terms of direction to go back and make some adjustments to this section. And so we would bring that back for you to look
You want us
at.
to bring it back? Okay. Mr. O'Donnell?
I'm fine with the no trees and the 3-foot planter strips. I've seen the problems it causes. I don't want an increase in the fee in lieu. I understand the difficulty of putting a tree in a front yard when you don't have a front yard to put it in. And I wish that we could somehow get around that, whatever that fee is called with the county, or subsidize it. Recording fee, subsidize it to encourage people to put a tree somewhere on the property.
That only applied to that street tree program we had.
I
It
know.
doesn't apply, that doesn't apply to this. Remember Tom Guile came in?
Yeah, I remember.
It applied to that specific program. This is not that program.
We do allow applicants to, in lieu of planting in the planter strip, to dedicate a street tree, a tree in their yard as a street tree through this as a mitigation option currently as well.
If they have space.
Yeah, if they have space.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, well,
But
we'll
that-
look forward to getting that back then.
And that dedication involves a fee with the county to register.
Correct.
Okay, so it is part of this program. Okay, regardless.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the work.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Is it now time for the Public Works Show? Ms. Webb, nice to see you again. Mr. Lewis, long time no see.
Thank you, Commissioner. So tonight we're here to talk to you about the Metro's Regional Transportation Plan, and I'll just be square. Dana speaks regional transportation plan language better than anybody in the city staff, so she's going to be talking to you about this. She's done the lion's share of the work on this. As you know, she represents the metro cities in metro meetings, and this RTP is, luckily we only update this RTP every 5 years because it's kind of a, it's just a challenging little thing to have to do. So anyway, she's going to give you the update, and I'll be here.
So you're going to do the translation of the RTP language into regular language?
Dana can do that. She's the interpreter.
Okay. Just thinking about those that don't speak RTP that, we're required to have accommodation.
All right, good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. I'm here tonight, as you've been discussing the Regional Transportation Plan and the call for projects. As John mentioned, this is a requirement that's done every 5 years, and it's led by Metro, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, for the Portland metropolitan area. And so they oversee the Regional Transportation Plan. So I'll just give you a brief overview of the Regional Transportation Plan policy framework, which includes their vision and goals. So the RTP vision is everyone in the greater Portland region will have safe, reliable, affordable, and climate-friendly travel options to allow people to choose to drive less and support equitable, resilient, healthy, and economically vibrant communities and region. And so that is kind of the vision that the Metro Council has adopted for this RTP update. And with that comes 5 goals for the RTP. Equitable transportation, climate action and resilience, thriving economy, safe system, and mobility options. And so as we identify our projects for the call for projects, those are kind of the lenses we're looking at for projects. So additionally, projects that are put into the Regional Transportation Plan must be on regionally designated systems. So there are bikeway systems, arterial networks, and pedestrian networks. The projects, again, need to identify and achieve those RTP vision and goals. They need to come from an adopted city plan that's had opportunities for public input. So we aren't able to just identify a project that isn't in a TSP or hasn't been through a public process. And projects need to cost a minimum of $2 million or be bundled with similar type projects. Additionally, when staff is kind of looking at projects to be included in the RTP, we are looking for projects that would be projects we would apply for federal or state funding. So many times that's a criteria point for those grant programs. And so tonight, I've got a map of the projects, and apologies, our city is taller than wide, and so it doesn't fit very easily on a slide. But in your packet, you should have had a full-size copy of this map of the projects. And again, these are all projects that have been in our TSP, have been through that public process, and help achieve those RTP vision and goals. And then kind of the next steps from here, assuming you're in agreement with the project list, the city list will be combined with all of the other cities and agencies in Clackamas County and will be presented to the C4 Metro Committee on February 15th. I have to have all of my data into Metro's online hub or database by February 17th, and then C4 will endorse the Clackamas County-wide project list at their March 2nd meeting. Once those endorsements are complete, then Metro does a technical analysis of the projects proposed. They look at how the individual projects advance the RTP goals, and they highlight projects that advance multiple goals of the system. So they will look at transportation analysis and equity, climate analysis, and also environmental. And then that list of projects will go out for public comment in the summer with an intention for Metro to adopt an RTP in November of 2023. So tonight, I'm looking for your direction. If you support the proposed project list, if you've got modifications, or kind of want to send us back to bring a different list.
Well, I generally agree with the list. I would have made one small suggestion. I had the map in front of me, and I had the list, and so I was trying to correlate the numbers on the list with the green and the purple. So not everything, so for instance, one project number 11184 is in the purple, so that's got a lower priority. You say financially constrained, I guess that's what that says, so that the likelihood that it's going to happen is probably not, but the ones in the green, so I would have highlighted the ones here that are on the green list, on the project list, so those have a high likelihood of moving forward, I presume, yes?
Yeah, talk through the colors, Dana, because I think what you said sounded backwards to me, but maybe not.
Well, I'm looking at your project funding. You have, the green ones are strategic. The orangish ones are financially constrained, and the purple ones are financially constrained. So I was looking at the list, and it looks like...
But financially constrained doesn't mean what a non-traffic engineer would think it means.
Okay, what
it means it's likely to be funded.
Does it mean it's likely to be funded? Because that's not what it meant to me.
So the projects in purple are the projects identified that are likely to be able to be funded, so financially constrained, meaning we anticipate enough revenues to cover those projects in the time period between 2023 and 2030. And then the yellow list is the kind of the longer-term financially constrained projects. And then the strategic list is projects that we would like to fund, but we don't have that funding available.
Well, I read them in completely the opposite way.
So did I.
Which everybody
So those
would.
aren't, again, this is the metro language.
I understand.
So-
I understand. I just read that completely different. I see green, that was green means go. Okay, I said, oh yeah, that's a great project. And then I'm looking at all these other ones saying, oh, well, gee, it'd be nice if we could do that, but we don't have the money. Financially constrained, to me, meant we don't have the money to do it.
I think it means that to everybody. It's back constrained, it's not constrained, but.
Okay, so how about an explanation of what? I read the report and I looked at the list.
Maybe, can you explain what you know about the science behind how Metro comes up with these revenue projections?
So each agency submits estimates of what we think we have for revenue in various different categories. And so then they take those, if we've got transportation SDCs, our gas tax funds, some cities have additional funding sources like a local gas tax or a local sidewalk fee on their utility bills. So we take all of those funding sources and we identify how much per year those are. We also take the annual operations and maintenance budget that those agencies have. And so then at the end, you come out of that with a draft revenue forecast that's available for capital. And at that point, then we identify projects that fit into that funding level. So in this scenario, the financially constrained are ones that in theory, we would collect enough revenues to build, and the strategic is, if that financially constrained bucket is $100 million, the strategic bucket is an additional $100 million of monies that you might receive. And that's about the best way to explain it. It's not actual dollars. It's if we get federal grants, if, a funding bill comes out. And so it's an assumption. And again, how Metro kind of comes up with these is a little kind of a black box, but they work with FHWA that approves the regional transportation plan.
Okay.
So it's definitely an aspirational list, and I think ARPA funding, it would be a good example of money that an agency gets and wasn't planned in the regional plan, and then maybe you can afford to fund either the financially constrained list sooner, or you can allocate that money to something that's on your strategic list. But it's aspirational. I think, I've heard other elected folks talk about, at the county level in particular, how it's a plan that is almost designed to never really be able to fully be implemented because there's just not enough funding to fund all these things. But they're on the list, and sometimes because of another project or another situation, having that on the list, whether it's at the top of the list or the bottom of the list, matters. We then can advocate for that facility to be built because, say, a development triggers it or something like that, and then we can look to the region to help do that. Or, I hate to talk about the 205 tolling project, but if there was revenue that came from that and that somehow triggered something, if it's not on this list, that's going to be more difficult for us to fund. And so to me, it's a worthy effort, but my hope is that this city commission and other city commissions don't get too hung up on it, because it's a little bit of hocus pocus.
Well, I'm not hung up on it, but I'm kind of curious, where do the strategic projects fit into the two time periods, the purple being 2023 to 30, and the orange being 31 to 45? Is it possible, are you saying, John, the strategic projects could move at any time depending on a change in need, be reclassified?
Well, I think that the timing is really about that revenue projection and how much we can fit into those gaps. Any of these projects could play into those time frames. It's really just trying to say, well, we see a revenue projection that provides so many dollars. Here's the projects that we can fit into that, and they fit into that category. But that's not to say that something that's on the green list couldn't move forward. It's just a process of putting it in buckets of funding and we're prioritizing it. We're saying we think our most preferred bucket is that 2023 to 2030 financially constrained list. That's our preferred, most likely to get funded.
Sure.
Mr. Mitchell.
Just a quick question. On the map, there's 10048, which looks like it's Holly Lane.
It looked like that to me.
Yeah, but I couldn't find that on the list.
It says Butill Road, I
That's,
think. 100.
I don't think there's a 10048 on the list.
There's a 10047.
No, you're right. There's a long yellow line
Yep.
on the east side of the city, shown goes from our Park Place concept plan to Maple Lane, right? That's the project you're talking about.
Yeah, but I
Okay.
don't see it on the list to see what we're proposing to do.
I don't have the project list in front of me.
So it does not look like it's on the list. I would need to double-check my bigger spreadsheet. That project is Holly Lane Bike and Pedestrian Improvements.
If it's not on there, I'm perfectly fine with that.
And I'm sort of looking to John, if he remembers if we did remove it and it just did not get removed from the map.
No, I don't believe we removed it. So keep in mind, Holly Lane, if the Park Place concept plan were to develop, would be, at least in that, whatever that city limits looks like, would be more of a collector arterial street. But then when it leaves the city's limits, it would be more of wide shoulders and wide enough asphalt outside the travel lane for bike lanes, so there wouldn't be sidewalks in the county road section. It's an important piece. I don't know how many of you remember the concept plan for the Beaver Creek concept plan. If you remember that, and if you remember some of the things that we looked at with regard to our alternate mobility standards at Beaver Creek in 2013, the long-range plan is to have that, make sure that that connection between the Beaver Creek concept plan and the Park Place concept plan is an active transportation corridor, because that would then limit some of the use of 213 in that same corridor and that intersection of Beaver Creek and 213.
Okay, so we're talking about taking a regional transportation system and dumping it on a substandard road, because I recall our very heated discussions about Holly Lane, and we basically said, in essence, we really wanted it out. We felt that it was constrained and that the development of that road was not going to be beneficial to the city because it's also doing what South End Road does, moving, sliding away. And we did not support having Holly Lane do that because of all of its environmental problems. So, if this isn't on the list, it's...
Without it?
I don't think we want to dump traffic from 213 onto this substandard road.
I think you're thinking about it in today's standards. I think if you want the Park Place concept plan to succeed or the Beaver Creek concept plan to succeed, you need that. You need a route so that traffic doesn't necessarily have to go out on Redland Road or out on Beaver Creek Road to 213. Instead, they would have a connector between those two areas that would be more along the lines of a collector and arterial. Without it, those other developments don't work.
It looks like it goes outside of the city limits.
It does go outside the city limits.
I don't support it for me personally, I don't support it outside the city limits. I think it's not in our best interest, but that's just my opinion. I'm not asking everybody else for their opinion about this. So do you want us to recommend, I don't have any problem with the purple or the whatever you're calling orange. I do have some heartburn about some of the green ones, but we can talk about that at some other time.
The timeline is a little tight, but we left ourselves room to bring it back if we need to bring it back. And that's, so it would be good to get consensus on that. I know you can pick one out of this, and, if it was the decision of the commission to remove a particular street, we can do that, or a particular project. Not quite sure why that wasn't on the list, but we'll check that for sure. But overall, most of these projects all of these projects were on the RTP last time. So we're not really, adding any projects to the list.
I get it. Yeah, I'm having a lot of heartburn about project 11552, but I think that needs a lot of discussion. I don't want to just show up on some plan and then have that shoved down my neighborhood's throat. So that now that I read the staff report and I looked at the map, and I'm sorry I misinterpreted it backwards because that's what it looked like to me.
Anybody would.
So anyway.
11,552.
Yeah, I think I should have on my report put in parentheses behind each of those bullet points the colors so I knew what the heck. Because I had the colors, but I had them in the wrong order.
Most English-speaking people would.
Okay, good. Glad I wasn't the only one. Oh, my Lord. So do we have support for the things on here that are in the magenta or purple color that look like they would be funded during our lifetimes?
Yeah, I'm not, if that's all we were to submit, the city would be,
I'm asking them piece by piece, not saying that we're excluding everything else. I'm just saying, do we have general consensus that looks good? And then we'll move to the next
oh,
version.
Can I,
Sure.
and correct me if I'm misunderstanding this, but if it's on the list, whether it's purple or orange or green, it's on the list. It could potentially happen. If we take it off the list, that would greatly reduce the chance that it could ever get built. But even if it's on the list, there'll be another decision point. It's not like
that's true.
everything on that list is going to happen.
Yes.
But being on the list means it potentially could happen or potentially be discussed down the road when the funding looks like it's there.
I guess
To take it off the list removes it from future consideration.
Yeah, most of these projects, one, they're the kind of projects where we would pursue state or federal funding. So typically there's an application process for that, and any grant application we've been bringing to the commission for approval before we submit. So, if we any one of the projects that are on here, if we're pursuing that, Holcomb Boulevard, for instance, there's a section of that we just got the grant for, that's on the list. But yeah, I think, now that's not to say just because of the Park Place concept plan, the stuff that's in that Park Place concept plan, we would still require that of a developer because it's listed that way in our TSP as well. It's not just the RTP. That project is listed in our transportation system plan as well. So
I guess
there's other bites at the apple.
Yeah,
sure.
I think that's the other question, is just, I know how it is in my profession. If it shows up on a list somewhere, there's always the possibility that it can happen. There is less likely the possibility that it won't happen. I mean, again, it's on some list and, 10 years from now, oh, well, it's on the RTP, so that means we're going to do it. I don't know where the decision points are to, that's going to be up to some other commission because we're not going to be on the commission in 2030, but, well, maybe we are. Maybe you might be on the commission in 2030.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I just want to be on this side of the dirt.
Well, because this will be going to C4 Metro and to C4, so there are steps before it's finalized, and Commissioner Mitchell and myself are on those.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean you guys are going to take, that C4 is going to take anything out unless we say we don't like it or we don't want it to be on there, So do we leave everything on, or do you have suggestions for things that you would like to see not be on the list, knowing that that means on this map, that's not going to happen? Because if we take it off, unless it comes back in some future date, then that's the end of it.
I'll make a motion to approve this list as presented.
Second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded.
Commissioner Adam Morrow?
Aye.
Commissioner Mike Mitchell?
Aye.
Commissioner Rocky Smith?
Aye.
Commissioner Frank O'Donnell?
Aye.
And Mayor Denise McGrath.
No.
The motion passes.
All right,
Thank you.
knowing the concerns, keep that in mind. Okay, city manager,
I have no updates tonight, thank you.
you have no updates?
Ma'am.
Commissioners? Go ahead.
So I wanted to revisit a comment or a motion that was made on the Urban Renewal Commission. Urban Renewal Commission was talking about properties. The motion was made to not ignore possible potential development offers on properties. I threw in, because I was thinking about the parking lot downtown Oregon City, which has had previous potential offers or potential projects come towards us. I basically, at the Urban Renewal Commission, added to the motion city properties. I wanted to clarify that. Also, one, because the city commission needs to make that decision, not the urban renewal commission, to add properties that are not necessarily urban renewal. But to clarify that more by saying I was not talking about, of course, any parks or any city properties that have buildings or facilities on them. I was talking specifically about city properties that still, for some reason, in some cases, are not listed in urban renewal, that may have houses on them or that may have businesses that are leased out on them. I've lost track of some of the properties that are urban renewal and city properties, but what I was thinking specifically, if we have parking lots or other lots or other rental properties that might have proposals come forward, that we don't want to ignore those as a city. We want to hear from those even if they're not realistic. That's what I was trying to get. So I don't know if this commission wants to clarify that.
Do you commissioners need clarification, or did everybody?
I guess if there's consensus, the understanding was similar to Urban Renewal Commission, that if we have a city-owned property that has development potential, we're going to entertain offers on those, just like we would for a Renewal Commission.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right. Can the record reflect that we have a consensus on clarification of Commissioner's statement? Yes.
Yeah, so it was City Day at the Capitol last week, and so there were a lot of city councilors at in the halls of the Capitol speaking to their legislators, and I did not partake in the festivities, but fortunately I am adjacent to those festivities because that's my place of work, and so I just wanted to give an update, and it was a very successful, I think they had over 200 attendees from a very diverse array of areas across the state, so I think they were really excited about that.
This was LOC's
sponsored, City Day, and a lot of people were submitting capital construction requests to their legislators, and so I would just ask that our city staff look into capital construction requests to our delegation, to our state senator and state representative, because the cities that were coming to our office and making requests were the same kind of requests that I think Oregon City would make, and it related pretty much to water infrastructure. So I would just ask that our staff pursue those opportunities, because we are so, I was going to say constrained, but maybe that's not the right word anymore. In that field. And I also just wanted to give a quick update on the same lines of urban renewal. So Summit has told us that they're pursuing other buckets of funding for their project, so that ultimately decreases the final ask of urban renewal if/when that comes. And I wanted to give an update on a bill that Senator Mark Meek is chief sponsoring, Senate Bill 630. It would basically authorize the issuance of lottery bonds and transfer those net proceeds to a grant program that would be administered to developers who are trying to build housing on landfills. And so this is a pilot project that is geared toward the Rossman landfill, and it would also require the successful grant applicants to complete a study of how they were able to successfully do that, so it can be replicated across other communities. So it is interesting because apart from some Portland metro area legislators who have more connections to the Rossman landfill, it has gotten some co-sponsors from representatives from the coast and from Southern Oregon, because this is something that a lot of communities are looking into for their future community development. But that is coming up for a hearing in committee on February 16th. Again, that's Senate Bill 630, chief sponsored by Senator Meek, to look at how the state can help fill the gap that Summit has identified at the Rossman landfill.
So in conjunction with that, Mr. Conkle report, we met with Representative Hartman, and we did give her a list of capital things. She also brought up the fact that there is an equity issue with regard to putting housing on brownfields, and she has concerns about that. I would say that based on what she raised at that meeting, I would also echo the fact that I would say I would have some concerns about that. I think you get into a situation where you have parcels elsewhere all over the state where they're they are adversely affecting, low-income people, people of color, that sort of thing, and she threw that in not the Rossman landfill, but she talked about brownfields in general. Because your report on what we gave Representative Hartman, she asked us for that. She requested that we put together a list, so we have done that.
So we met with her about 2 weeks ago, and then we thought we had about a month, but we found out we had a couple of days. But we had previously submitted, last legislative cycle, some capital requests. So for, like tonight, we approved the purchase of the property for potential Henrici, so we put in a request for funding for a new reservoir. Jug handle phase 2, so kind of 213 northbound, southbound, right around Redland, where the intersection is there. Highway 213 and Beaver Creek Road, we have some projects identified in that area for capacity and safety improvements. Main Street, 10th to 15th, so completing that Main Street section. So they're asking for kind of larger capital projects, and we heard the same thing concerning water infrastructure, but transportation as well, so.
We've done it.
Perfect.
Yep. All right, anything? The only thing I have is that I have a list of people that I need to appoint to the CIC and the Library Board, and I'd like concurrence of those appointments. They have all been interviewed. Well, not that, well, we actually interviewed them in Lisburg for something else, so I'm familiar with her. So can I have a consensus that you're fine with that? Okay. We'll make it so. All right. Do we have any further business? How much of a little break do you want? We have to go into executive session. Let's go 7. Okay. We'll adjourn, and then we'll reconvene in executive session in 7 minutes.